I'm with Mark A. Langley from the Project Management Institute, which recently released its 2018 Pulse of the Profession findings. At the top of its report is the importance of an actively engaged sponsor, an influential executive who can advocate for the project, help overcome the challenges that a team may encounter, and drive change through their organisation. Mark, executive sponsorship keeps coming up as a driver of success. So what's the business impact they can have?
Well, this year's Pulse of the Profession reveals the same fact, which is an active, engaged executive sponsor is the #1 success factor in projects and programs. And I think it really comes from the fact that in order to enable that success, you need that executive support, not just at the beginning of the project or program when they sign up and provide approval and identify some resources. They play an active role through the life cycle of the project or program. They communicate across the organization and up in the organization to the other executives around why that project or program is going to create critical value and what that value is, so that the organization can identify that, track it as the project or program goes on through development, and ultimately as they're released over to operations, having practices in place to sustain those benefits. So they play a critical role back into the operations of the organization. And as in all projects and programs, they don't go smoothly. In the end of the day, there's always some problem. The next role that a sponsor plays is really in kind of tearing down those roadblocks, the barriers to success.
What's the business impact of not having executive sponsors clearing roadblocks from these projects?
Ultimately, dollars wasted. So our Pulse of the Profession identified this year that 9.9% of project budget is wasted due to poor performance. Champion organizations, those that are more successful and employ some of the leading practices, actually waste 21 times less than low-performing organizations. So there's serious money at risk or wasted due to poor performance. I think equally important is that if you understand that all projects and programs are implementation of strategy, then you recognize that it's not just dollars and cents, it's ultimately your strategy that's at risk. So without those sponsors, dollars wasted due to poor performance and ultimately less likelihood to achieve strategy.
How can an organization empower executive sponsors?
First thing they can do is establish a formal role. So what is that role? What are their duties? How do they interact with the organization, with other organization leaders? How do they break down silos across the organization? If that can be defined and formalized, then you can actually help individuals with the second area, which is giving ongoing training around the skills, the behaviors, and the duties that they will perform across the organization. I think there are two critical areas: formalize and then ultimately train.
And then how can organizations also foster a positive relationship between the executive sponsor and the project management team?
Well, it's interesting. I find in talking to project teams that they know in their organization who the best sponsors are. So the best thing they can do is help the sponsors with the training and development, but also manage the bandwidth of the sponsors. Our research on executive sponsorship a couple of years ago identified that sponsors were overworked. They spent nearly 35 hours a week in their sponsor duties, and they also had other full-time activities that they were responsible for. So they're really stretched too thin. Leading organizations, champion organizations, recognize exactly how much the burden of that is on an executive sponsor and manage that more directly. I think the other area is celebrating successes. I think it's important that throughout the project there's successes. And sometimes when we're looking for project excellence, the best way to identify it is to point to a concrete example that they see in the organization right then, and that builds the morale and the relationship with the team and the executive sponsors.
Thanks for watching. Click through for more updates from the Project Management Institute, and please subscribe for the latest business, finance and strategic insights from EuropeanCEO.com.